This is the Dennis Miller Show.
We are joined now by Dr. Stephen Meyer, who is a fellow at the Discovery Institute and the author of Signature in a Cell, DNA and the Evidence for Intelligent Design. Welcome to the show, Dr. Meyer.
Great to be with you this morning, Dennis.
Can you give me a layman's and relatively brief explanation of intelligent design?
Yeah, you bet. It's just the idea that there are certain features that point to intelligent activity. We make what we call inferences to intelligent design all the time in ordinary life. A simple example is driving in the Dakotas and looking up on the mountainside and seeing the faces of the presidents and inferring that you're looking at the work of a sculptor rather than a natural force like wind and erosion. Mm-hmm. Inside life, you don't have little faces, but you have other indicators of intelligent activity like little tiny miniature machines, rotary engines, sliding clamps, turbines, that kind of thing, but also, most importantly, the intricate 4-character digital code that conveys the instructions for building all the proteins and protein machines that the cell needs to stay alive.
So we're getting into really stuff that is beyond, I think when you get into subatomic and stuff like that and protein code, you're losing half of the population, including yours truly, but you would say that in the short, intelligence design indicates the existence of some sort of God, for lack of a better word or a worse word.
Yeah, absolutely. But it sounds complicated because of the terminology. But what scientists are finding inside the cell is absolutely astounding them. It's nanotechnology, little miniature machines, and then this 4-character digital code that's stored along the spine of the DNA molecule. Bill Gates says it's like a software program, only much more complex than any we've ever created. We know from experience that that programs always come from programmers. We know more generally that information, especially if it's in a digital or alphabetic form, always comes from an intelligent source, whether we're looking at a hieroglyphic inscription or a headline in a newspaper or a section of a book or information embedded in a radio signal. If we trace it back to its source, it always comes to an intelligent cause, not an undirected process. A mind, we're looking at evidence of a mind, not a purely mindless material process.
We're talking to Dr. Stephen Meyer. He is the author of Signature in a Cell, DNA and the Evidence for Intelligent Design. I notice I have a defense mechanism in my life where I get to something that I feel like I'm incapable of grasping, and I start to get overly glib. As I reach my 56th year, I should probably push through that and continue
You're the host. You're allowed to do that.
Well, but I should continue to query you on this because it's my insecurity that takes me away from it. When you say what are you saying?
A 4-character code.
4-character code. Try to explain to me what you're finding inside a cell that has 4 components.
Yeah, absolutely. This was the great discovery first of Watson and Crick. They discovered the famous double helix structure of the DNA molecule. We all are aware of it. It's a cultural icon. We convict criminals and establish paternity with DNA, but people don't really realize what it is about DNA that enables us to make these determinations. And Crick was the first one to really get onto it. As in 1957, he came up with something that was called the sequence hypothesis. And what he proposed, which was subsequently confirmed, is that there are 4 chemicals. They're called bases, and he proposed that they function just like alphabetic letters in a written text or digital characters in a machine code. And that is to say they send the instructions to a factory within the cell for building all the machinery this cell needs to stay alive. I've got a piece of animation that makes this really clear on my website, signatureinthecell.com, and it shows exactly how this 4-letter code conveys instructions for building the parts that the cell needs. And we have something very similar to this up here in Seattle at the Boeing plant and many other manufacturing centers around the country where engineers will design parts and they'll use a computer, and then they'll literally they'll design it to specs. The design will literally be codified, embedded, represented in digital code. It will then be transmitted across down the wire and translated into a machine code that the manufacturing center can read. and then that code will be used to, for example, if you're an airline factory, put the rivets in exactly the right place as you're building the airplane wing. Mm-hmm. So the information, the digital information, is literally directing the construction of the manufactured parts, and that's exactly what's going on inside the cell. We know, therefore, what the information does, but the big mystery has always been, where did it come from? And that's where the theory of intelligent design comes in. Fascinating.
Do any of Crick's original notes advance the theory that DNA applies everywhere except the O.J. trial? Did he foresee that possibility?
The O.J. trial, exactly. He didn't anticipate O.J. He was a genius, but that was the one thing he didn't get.
There are always anomalous situations.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's take it over to the Smithsonian and the canceling of this film. Tell me about the film and your theory. I guess it's advancing some thoughts on intelligent design. It's been canceled. Why?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be a coincidence. There have been a number of these kinds of events, either scientists being expelled from their positions or demoted or losing their funding, and it always seems to have one common denominator, and it's their advocacy for intelligent design or skepticism about Darwin. And there's a museum with a theater in California Science Center that was going to premiere a film called Darwin's Dilemma, which is about this big problem of the origin of information in the history of life. And the California Science Center is affiliated with the Smithsonian. When the Smithsonian found out about it, they apparently put pressure on the California Science Center to shut it down. And the Science Center informed the American Freedom Alliance, the sponsoring group, that their contract was null and void. They weren't going to honor it, and they needed to find another place. So it's been, unfortunately, an all too typical reaction to scientists being confronted with this new perspective and the evidence that supports it.
God, can you imagine if, like, Van Leeuwenhoek or somebody had these sort of stipulations? You can only go so far, where we'd almost be still troglodytic in our advances.
Absolutely. A lot of people ask me, well, why did the Darwinians respond and react with such venom when they're at the mere thought of exposing people to this alternative perspective about evolution? Mm-hmm. And I think part of the answer is actually religious. I have a colleague that I sometimes debate. He's a friendly Darwinian. His name is Michael Ruse, and he's written a very interesting book in which he explains that for many scientists, Darwinian evolution and the other associated evolutionary theories have formed the basis of what he calls a secular religion. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so when people's religious beliefs are challenged, they often respond very emotionally. Sometimes they use power to suppress views they don't like, and it's a very typical human reaction, but it's not exactly what you'd call scientific.
Yeah, you see it in the global warming community, essentially a cathedral now that the faith is based on disparaging creationists. I mean, that's the common link.
There's a real commonality. In fact, I just wrote an op-ed piece about this. The public is always shocked by this kind of irrational behavior among scientists, but what happens is you get the perception of a consensus, and that then ends up shutting down critical discourse. And in the global warming debate, you have it. I mean, here we've just we haven't had any appreciable warming in 10 years, and it never was that big of an effect. And we've got these incredibly cold winters starting to settle in, and we got cap and trade trying to fix a problem that may not even exist.
May not even exist at a great expense.
Consensus in the Darwinian debate, where it's a highly ideologically charged field. We're talking about one of the great philosophical issues of all time. Is life the result of a mindless, undirected process, or was there a purposive intelligence behind things? That's a big issue, and it makes sense that people would have a little more invested in a stake in that than just the scientific data. And what can happen is you get one group kind of in charge of the debate, and they shut down the others.
Yeah, well, the true geniuses are the brave ones who take O'Brahe off the herd at the first sign. Keep an open mind. We're talking to Stephen Meyer, Discovery Institute Fellow and author of Signature in a Cell, DNA, and the Evidence for Intelligent Design. Real quickly, I don't know enough about Darwin, except he took Sharon Stone's husband to the Galapagos and got his foot bitten by a Komodo. But what do we know about? Was Darwin a flat-out atheist? Did he espouse atheism?
No, but he was what you might call a scientific materialist. He really wanted to refute what was called the design argument, and to show that life could arise, the appearance of design in living organisms and living forms could arise by purely undirected material processes. That led him to at least a position of pretty strong agnosticism. We're this year celebrating the 200th anniversary of Darwin's birth and 150th anniversary of the origin of species, and there are huge celebrations, as you might imagine, kind of the same sort of with the same sort of fervor as the global warming crowd, and they're in the biology departments. But what many people don't realize is that Darwin never even attempted to explain how the whole process got started, how the origin of the first life came to be. And that's what my book Signature in the Cell is really about. It's about what I call the DNA enigma, the mystery of the information needed to get life going in the first place. Darwin was unaware of that mystery because we didn't know about DNA and we didn't know about digital code in cells, but we do now. And in the 50-some-odd years since Watson and Crick's discovery, the mystery of the origin of information has just deepened for evolutionary biologists, and yet there is a kind of cause that we know of that is capable of producing information, and that cause is intelligence or mind or rational deliberative activity. It's not that hard at some level.
I am going to be reading Signature in a Cell because I found Dr. Stephen Meyer to be fascinating here, and it is hard to believe that Darwin, anybody could stride barefoot in the Galapagos and not at some point believe in the magic, that there was something else behind this, just a random accumulation of, events, molecules, atoms, whatever. It just seems, it's almost like going to Ducasse, the restaurant or something, and not asking to compliment the chef because you assume that the ingredients just all got together in the kitchen and dove into a pot together. So I don't know. I guess I'm a believer, and I don't call it intelligence design. I call it God. And like I've said in the past, I believe God created Darwin, so we'll go from there. Stevie, you're a smart kid. You keep up your studies. Where are you at now, 11th grade?
Yeah, 11th grade, yeah. Going on. I'm on my 19th year of college, and maybe I'll graduate someday.
All right, you're a good kid. We'll talk at you down the road. That's Dr. Stephen Meyer. The book is Signature in a Cell, DNA and the Evidence for Intelligent Design. And this is the Dennis Miller Show.